Shana Tova. I'd like to ask for you to raise your hand if you have ever made a positive change in your behavior or your habits that you thought at one point in time would be impossible. Okay. So look around. You who are raising your hands have most likely experienced quite a bit of what we've been talking about in the past couple days. You've made big apologies. You've waded through a whole lot of history and hurt in order to finally say, I forgive you. But I would imagine for many of you that one of the hardest parts of making that change was accepting the possibility of it. The possibility that you could become a different person than the one you always were. We each have habits and tendencies that lead us to wrongdoing again and again, habits and tendencies that can seem unresolvable or untouchable. Sometimes we're born with these, and sometimes experiences in our lives have led to them. As Rambam or Maimonides teaches in Hilchot Deot, the laws of knowledge, with regard to all of a person's tendencies and character traits, a person has some from the beginning of her conception in accordance with her bodily nature. Some are appropriate to a person's nature or will, and therefore will be acquired more easily than other traits. Some traits she does not have from birth. She may have learned them from others or turned to them on her own. This may have come as a result of her own thoughts or because she heard that this was the proper trait for her, which she ought to attain. Therefore, she accustomed herself to it until it became a part of herself. And yet, even with the ever-present nature of these traits, Rambam insists in Hilchot Tshuva, the laws of repentance, each person is fit to be righteous like Moshe, our teacher, or wicked like Jeroboam. She may be wise or foolish, merciful or cruel, miserly or generous, or acquire any other character traits. There is no one who compels her, sentences her, or leads her towards either of these two paths. Rather, she, on her own initiative and decision, tends to the path she chooses. While it may be painstakingly difficult to change, we cannot accept that we are defined by what we have done, who we have been, or even how we have failed. Teshuvah is possible, it's even accessible, through a recognition of where we have come from and a redefinition of who we are going forward. I think back to my middle school English teacher, whose voice still rings clearly in my head every time I write anything at all. Her voice determines my sentence structure and my word choice. Her wisdom encourages me to use the limits of grammar and syntax to think outside the box. My teacher was incredibly encouraging, and at the same time, she created a nickname for me that has held me back for my entire life since. In this teacher's class, every time I was late or lost my train of thought or dropped something on the floor, I was Ditzy Sydney. As my teacher otherwise encouraged and inspired me, I didn't think too deeply about that name, the name that other students started calling me, and that eventually I started calling myself. A decade later, however, at a religious school teachers meeting in Los Angeles, the director offered an icebreaker in which she asked about one thing a teacher said to us, positive or negative, that had stuck with us till that day. As I reflected on my middle school teacher's influence, I realized that this label of Ditzy Sydney was keeping me from believing that I could develop ways to remember events and tasks and details, that I could create pathways to start getting to places on time, and that I could speak with conviction and without apology for repeating or forgetting a couple of words. Not only was Ditzy Sydney affecting my own quality of life, but the nickname gave me a sort of excuse for being unreliable in my commitments and my relationships to other people. So now, over another decade later, I am still working every day to erase that nickname from the perception of myself. As you might know if you've ever taken my first meeting of the day or have seen me try to find a particular book or paper in my office, I still have a long way to go. And yet, it has been incredibly freeing to realize that I do not have to accept my shortcomings and leave it at that. Making changes in my identity and actions has been difficult, and I continue to journey on that path of tshuva because it would be a dishonor to the God who gave me free will to pretend that there is nothing I can do to improve my character or my situation. For the great 20th century halachist and philosopher Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, one is forbidden to take one's mind off of the principle of free choice, where it was not given to man only from without or by tradition. It is also something in the nature of self-discovery and must always remain part of the self. The knowledge that a man can create worlds and destroy them. While you are welcome to be angry at the people and at the events that influenced who you are and what you do today, it is still your responsibility to know with your full heart that you are not bound by that identity forever. You have the power to act towards yourself and others the way you wish you could, in spite of and perhaps even motivated by who and what once influenced you. In most cases, belief alone cannot transform a person or her actions. Rambam defines teshuvah as when someone, quote, confronts the same situation in which she has done wrong, when she has the potential to commit the wrongdoing again, and nevertheless abstains and does not commit it because of her teshuvah alone and not because of fear or lack of strength. With that definition, the person seeking teshuvah must do the work before her repentance counts in the eyes of God, and more directly before she can truly shed her previous habits and identity. The first step towards teshuvah must be acknowledging the pattern of wrongdoing and investigating its roots and its triggers. No problem can be solved by ignoring it or refusing to believe that it exists. When we investigate what has influenced us to perform our misdeeds in the past, we learn what places and situations we need to avoid. We learn about the people with whom we need to set boundaries, and we learn about people who, with respect and compassion, we need to confront to let them know the hurt and the struggle they have caused us. For those whose identities are ingrained within us, let's say Ditzy Sydney, for example, we need to actively stop calling ourselves those names in our internal dialogue. We need to speak up when others repeat those names or make jokes about our identity, and we need to be open with them about the self we are working towards. We need to have the people in our lives who can hold us accountable for the commitments we make to ourselves and to others. When we embark on the journey of teshuvah, we learn who our real friends and our real supporters are, who will encourage our new identity, offer us safe space, and encourage us to seek help. In an echo of what we spoke about yesterday morning and the evening before, teshuvah is not fully complete until we have both given reparations for the wrongs we have committed and given wholehearted personal apologies to all we have hurt. If we caused hurt in public, a public apology is necessary too. Sometimes righting a wrong takes a relatively simple act, such as returning an object, compensating with money, or changing a policy or tendency for the future, so that we no longer have the opportunity to hurt others in the ways that we once did. Often, however, so much has been lost that amends can seem out of reach. In cases in which it is safe and healthy for all parties involved to be in communication, creating opportunities for redress must involve the offended party. She may ask for donations or volunteer time. She may ask for a public demonstration of change, or she may just ask for us to listen. As Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg writes in her book, Repentance and Repair, one does not offer amends at the person harmed, but to them. In just a few minutes, when Francine sings Unetana Tokef, she will proclaim that teshuvah, repentance, tefillah, prayer, and tzedakah, righteousness, can abate God's foreboding decree. Her words will demonstrate that even the most complete teshuvah cannot succeed in a lasting sense without tefillah and tzedakah. Our teshuvah requires a gratitude for the God who gave us the gift of free will, a plea to that same God for the strength to continue on our path, and yet another plea that others will not have to go through what we did to get here. Through tzedakah, through offering resources and moral support to those who are experiencing a version of our struggles, we complete the circle of return. As the Talmudic rabbis muse about the greatness of teshuvah, Gedolah Teshuvah, they say, in Tractate Yoma, the sage Reish Lakish extols teshuvah's ability to change an intentional transgression into an unintentional transgression. Even after Reish Lakish's stunning proclamation, the anonymous voice of the Talmud interrupts itself, and it declares that Reish Lakish got it wrong. Or that the voice of the Talmud, the anonymous voice of the Talmud, got Reish Lakish wrong. No, Reish Lakish really said, great is tshuva, gedolah tshuva, as it can change an intentional transgression all the way into a merit. Regardless, when a person performs teshuvah, for the rabbis, she has the ability to either lessen or come close as she can, or if we're reading the rabbis literally, to reverse completely the consequences of her transgressions. Through restoring relationships and freeing our energies and attention from the confines of guilt and shame on both the spiritual and the practical plane, teshuvah allows us to truly start over again, to truly rebuild who we are and what we do. For anyone who still doubts the realistic nature of teshuvah, you have been at this too long or you've tried to change too many times before, I encourage you to research the story of Rabbi Mark Borovitz, now Rabbi Emeritus of the Jewish addiction recovery community Beit Teshuvah. After decades of living as an addict and a perpetual thief, moving in and out of prison, Rabbi Borovitz found his place in Jewish text study and ritual from one of his prison chaplains. But Judaism itself was not enough, and after re-entering his life as a con artist, Rabbi Borovitz found himself in prison yet again. It was not until he met his chaplain, Harriet Rosetto, the self-proclaimed Jewish jail lady, who would eventually become his wife, that he was able to end his cycle of addiction. It was not until he accepted her invitation to come work at the emerging Beit Teshuvah once he got out that he was able to begin reversing the wrongs he had done, saving the lives of other thieves and addicts. And it was not until he was able to do that he could truly restore his relationship with the loved ones he had hurt, including his daughter Heather. Largely because of Rabbi Borovitz's decades of spiritual leadership, Beit Teshuvah now thrives as a treatment center, as a congregation, and as an education resource for the Los Angeles and wider Jewish community. Through acknowledging his responsibility in who he was and who he could be, accepting help, restoring relationships, and doing the active, compassionate work of helping others through their recovery, Rabbi Borovitz has been able to redefine who he is without forgetting who he was. Do not think for a moment that your misdeeds are beyond the realm of teshuvah. You have the agency to say the words, "I'm sorry," even if they are recited imperfectly. You are part of at least one community, this community, filled with people who are ready to help. Here you have friends who can act as your witnesses and your support system as you go to apologize to those you've hurt. Here you have opportunities to volunteer in acts of service, to accompany, and not to replace, but to accompany what you do to repay those you have wronged. In our wider community, you have organizations such as the Jewish Family Services and the network of community ministries to help you deal with your practical needs so that you have the time and capacity to deal with those aspects of yourself that you've been avoiding for so long. And perhaps most importantly, as we clearly witnessed earlier, you have people sitting right next to you who have experienced groundbreaking change themselves and who know how difficult and yet how achievable that change is. As we sing at the end of each Torah service, Hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva, Chadesh Yameinu kekedem. God, please return us to you, and we shall return. Renew our days as before. God, please be our rock, be our comfort, our inspiration towards the kind of tshuva that gives us the confidence, the time, the space, and the relationships we need in order to serve you with a full heart. L'shana tova u'metuka.